Every single growing season is this huge undertaking, right? It's packed with all sorts of variables. You've got weather, you've got pests, market prices, but all of it, every bit of it, starts with one single choice. It's a foundational decision that really sets the stage for everything else. So let's dig into what that critical first step actually is. So if you had to put all your chips on the table, if you had to bet the entire success of your farm on just one decision, what would it be? It's not about when you till the soil or how much fertilizer you put down, though those things are absolutely crucial. Nope, the real game changer happens way before a single seed ever even touches the dirt. That's it right there, choosing the specific cultivar or the variety. And for our purposes today, we can pretty much use those terms interchangeably. This is the ultimate economic decision. It's this high-stakes balancing act between trying to get the biggest yield possible and at the same time minimizing your risk. You get this right, you've got a real fighting chance. But if you get it wrong, well, you're basically playing catch-up for the rest of the season. Okay, so where does a producer even begin? The very first fork in the road is understanding the two main categories of seed you can buy. And this choice, it fundamentally shapes your entire strategy for the year. So first up, we've got hybrids. The best way to think about this is like strategic matchmaking for plants. Breeders take two very different, very pure parent lines and they cross them. What you get is this first-generation superstar offspring that shows something called hybrid vigor. It's just more. It's more robust, it grows faster, and, this is the big one, it has a significantly higher yield potential than either of its parents. And on the other side of the coin, you have your open-pollinated varieties. This is basically nature's way of doing things. Pollination just happens naturally, thanks to the wind, or bees, or other critters doing their thing. The breeding isn't tightly controlled, which means the plants tend to maintain their traits from one generation to the next pretty consistently. And this really gets to the heart of the trade-off. With a hybrid, you're chasing that huge yield potential, but it comes at a cost. The seed is more expensive, and you have to buy brand new seed every single year. You can't save it. Now, with an open-pollinated variety, you might not get that same explosive yield, but the seed is usually cheaper, and here's the kicker. You can save your own seed for next season. It's that classic battle of upfront investment for high performance versus a more sustainable, long-term approach. So let's say you've made that first big choice between hybrid and an open-pollinated variety. The options are still, well, they're overwhelming. We're talking thousands of varieties. That's why producers use a checklist, a set of core principles to narrow down the field and find the absolute perfect match for their specific farm. And here they are, the Big Four. Think of this as the essential pre-flight check for a successful season. You gotta get each of these right. It's totally non-negotiable if you want to maximize your profit and avoid nasty surprises. So let's break them down. First up is maturity. This is all about timing. A variety's maturity rating tells you how long it needs to be ready for harvest. So if you're in a region with a short growing season, you absolutely need a cultivar that's going to mature before that first frost hits. Or if you're in a drought-prone area, picking an early maturing variety means you might be able to get your crop harvested before the worst of the dry season sets in. It's all about matching the plant's internal clock to your local climate. Next up, yield and stability. Now, it is so tempting to just look at a catalog and pick the one with the highest advertised yield. But that's only half the story. A variety might give you a record-breaking crop in a perfect year with perfect weather, but then totally tank during a dry spell. Stability is about how consistently that variety performs, year after year, through the good weather and the bad. A really smart producer will often choose a variety with a slightly lower top-end yield if it's way more stable. It's just better risk management. Number 3 is pest resistance. This is like giving your crop its own built-in immune system from day one. By choosing a variety that already has genetic resistance to the common local diseases or insects, a producer can seriously cut down on crop loss. It's a proactive defense that also means you're spending less on chemical sprays and other inputs. And finally, we have to talk about the end use. You really have to start with the end in mind. Who is going to buy this crop and what are they going to do with it? Think about it. A tomato that's grown for the fresh market at a grocery store needs to be firm, it needs to look perfect. But a tomato that's going to be processed into ketchup needs totally different qualities, like a high solids content. Same goes for wheat. A variety for bread needs high protein, but one for animal feed is judged more on its energy content. The market dictates the choice. Now, that selection checklist we just went through has been around for decades. But modern biotechnology has added some incredibly powerful new tools to the kit. It's dramatically expanded the kinds of traits that breeders can work with. Let's take a look at how this modern toolkit really changes the game. And that brings us to transgenic crops, which you've probably heard called GMOs. The core idea is actually pretty straightforward. Genetic engineering allows scientists to take a specific, useful gene from one organism, it could even be a bacterium, and insert it directly into a plant's DNA. This gives the plant a brand new trait that it just could not have developed through traditional breeding. In agriculture, this technology has mostly been focused on solving some of the biggest production challenges out there. The most common applications you're going to see in the field today are treats that help manage weeds, fight off insects, or even, in some cases, boost the nutritional value of the crop itself. Herbicide resistance is a total game changer for weed control. Basically, this technology lets a producer spray a broad-spectrum herbicide, like glyphosate, over the entire field. The weeds die, but the crop, because it carries that resistant gene, is completely unharmed. It just simplifies weed management in a huge way. Insect resistance works in a really similar way, but it's designed for bugs. The most famous example is probably Bt corn or Bt cotton. These plants have a gene from a common soil bacterium that makes them produce a protein that's toxic only to very specific pests. So when an insect like a corn borer munches on the plant, it ingests that protein and dies. It's like having built-in season-long protection. Okay, so with all of these options out there, hybrids, open-pollinated varieties, transgenic traits, how on earth does a producer sift through all the marketing claims and figure out what truly performs best on their own land? Well, it all comes down to good science and knowing how to read the data. I mean, this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If you plant variety A and it yields more than variety B right next door, was it because A is really, truly better? Or was it just luck? You know, maybe your soil was a little bit better in that one spot, or one patch got a tiny bit more rain. To get a real honest answer, you need a properly designed experiment. And that's where the two golden rules of field trials come in. The first one is randomization. You scatter the plots of different varieties all around the field randomly, instead of grouping them all together. Why? This prevents bias. It makes sure that one variety doesn't accidentally get all the good soil. The second rule is replication. You don't just plant each variety once, you plant it in multiple plots. This is how you make sure your results aren't just a one-time fluke and that they're truly consistent. So after the harvest, we've got all this data, but we still need a way to make sense of it. And that's where a cool statistical tool called the least significant difference, or LSD, comes in. Think of it like a fact checker for your data. It calculates a threshold, a minimum difference in yield that has to exist between two varieties for us to be confident that the difference is real and it's not just random chance or noise. So how do you actually use this? Well, when you look at data from a real performance trial, researchers have already done the complex math for us. They often use a simple letter system to show the results. And the rule is super simple. If the results for two different varieties do not share a common letter, then the difference between them is real. It's statistically significant. So a variety marked with an A genuinely had a higher yield than ones marked with a B or C. But if you see two varieties that are both marked with a C, well, since they share a letter, we can't really be confident there's any real difference between them. It's a beautifully simple visual key to making a truly data-driven decision. So you see, from that fundamental choice between a hybrid or an open-pollinated variety, all the way to decoding complex genetic traits and statistical trials, selecting the right seed is really the starting point of our entire food system. And as we look toward the future, with a changing climate and new challenges on the horizon, that decision only becomes more and more critical. So what new traits will we need? What are we going to ask our crops to do for us next? Honestly, that is the question that's going to define the next generation of agriculture.